Hello, everyone. This is Dr. George Gonzalez on the Hologram Podcast, and I'm so excited today to have a special guest, Dr. Noah Moos. Dr. Noah Moos went to Logan Chiropractic College, and he graduated in 2010. And he was a collegiate steeplechase track and field athlete, as well as today he treats and trains professional athletes and works with elite performers. And he also is the president of the Human Nutrition Project. And Noah, I'm so excited to be with you. You know, we've known each other for several years now, and we're going to be speaking on the same stage at ICAK. And that's what this conversation's about, is about what projects you're doing. You've really advanced what you've been doing in your business, and I'm really excited to hear about it. And I'm sure everybody else is as well. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. Looking forward to getting to catch up in sunny San Diego in a few weeks here.
Yeah, very excited, and we have other events that we're going to be seeing each other at this year as well, and we always have a good time. So
yeah, always a blast.
Now you've been a chiropractor since 2010,
yep.
And you've been working with elite performers, elite athletes. You were an elite athletic performer yourself.
Yep.
And so how did you go from the starting in chiropractic into working in the athletics?
So it was actually kind of interesting. I just kind of growing up, I had a physio that worked with us. He was actually one of our. He was my AAU track and field coach growing up, and he did a lot of like applied kinesiology, Chinese medicines type of things. And so I got introduced to this at a really young age, and so. It was funny. I was actually just talking about this over the weekend with some other like students and docs and things like that. They asked me like kind of how I got started into this whole profession. And so I got introduced to it when I was about 16. And as soon as I saw somebody doing like some kinesiology and those kind of things, I was like, I know that's what I'm doing the rest of my life. Like I knew from the minute I saw like the work being done, I was like, that's it. That's what I need to do for sure. And so then I utilized it basically through my whole running career. And I saw like, as I started to work with it and start to learn some of the power of what it was, I saw big breakthroughs, in my running. I remember, getting treated one time for about an hour with some work and stuff like that. And then a week and a half later, we had our regional meet for cross country, and I ran a minute and a half faster for 8K, and 8K is about 5 miles. And so a minute and a half is like an enormous improvement. And it was, we had just cleared out a number of things that had been lingering for a long time. And so like after that, I was, that was even more of kind of a seeding. And then as I got along and I started to learn a lot more about some of the different potential that you could, with different techniques and different things, it's just kind of been something that I've always tried to layer on as I've been learning. And so I remember, I remember when I first, saw QN, I actually saw it on a video on a track and field website. And I was like, man, that looks really familiar to like what I'm doing. But I was like, there's something a little different. I need to figure out like what this is. And so that's how I kind of stumbled into QN, and it's been to quantum neurology, and it's been awesome. Like as an expander of what we do, it's kind of simplifies, directs, and expands what you can do. And so I've been, I think, about like 5 or 6 years now, been working with it. But man, I just love like this whole field and everything that you can do with it. And I think there's so much potential for expanding human performance and rehabilitating the body with this kind of work and the kind of things that we're doing, that I love it. I'm so passionate about it.
Absolutely, I am as well. And as you know, and maybe people who are watching may not know, is applied kinesiology is a system developed by Dr. George Goodhart. And he was revolutionary in the healing arts professions. And he started muscle testing individual muscles and found associations throughout the body in different factors that he identified: spinal and acupuncture and lymphatic and so on. And that really changed my way of looking at the nervous system and how to handle patients. And I know we're speaking at the ICA conference coming up. How has AK affected your practice and what you do? You mentioned learning first about it as an athlete, but as a doctor, what have you seen?
I mean, I think it's such a cool system because you know, it allows you to gather a lot of information about the physiology of the body without having to do as much like invasive testing or expensive testing, right? Like and so like the story I was telling about myself, right? When I had the 1.5-minute PR, well, it was my freshman year in college, and I was suffering with like a bunch of like really tired, dead legs, heavy legs, those kind of things like that. And as the guy that was working with me started to check me out, the quads and the hamstrings are related to the small intestine and large intestine. Well, I was having issues with like the dorm food that I was eating, you know, and it was like, you're living on a college budget, so you're not like eating the best things, and figured out that there was some like imbalances in my gut. And they basically got me on a few supplements that helped to kind of knock down some of the bad bacteria and like yeast and stuff like that was propagating from eating bad dorm food, cleared that out. And it was like somebody, you know, took, you know, 2 cinder blocks out of my legs and I could run. And so I think with this, the cool thing about like AK and using the muscles as almost like a switchboard or an indicator, you can really gather a ton of information uninvasively, very cost effectively, and it's fairly right on. And then, you know, if for some reason you need more testing or stuff like that later, you can always go to that kind of stuff. But it just, the diagnostic ability that you have with this kind of work is amazing. So
it is truly amazing when we start looking at the different concepts within applied kinesiology, including quantum neurology's usage of nerve testing through similar actions. And it just opens the door for things that seem not possible by other means, by other ways of looking at things. And I know you've worked with so many athletes and so many elite performers as well as regular family folk. And it's this aha when people start realizing, oh, you could do that too, and you could check this, and everything's related neurologically. And when we start testing the shared actions or the shared nerve supply to issues we're having, whether that's digestion, like you mentioned, or whether it's certain aspects of the nervous system, until somebody understands the connections neurologically speaking or lymphatically speaking or acupuncturally speaking, it doesn't make sense. It looks like a bunch of craziness.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But when you start, when you start putting together the mechanics of the body and allowing the mechanics of the body do what it's supposed to do, and you get the muscles to fire upon command, and that's why you could get such amazing personal records, like you mentioned, 1.5 minute gain on a personal record. That's mind blowing.
Yeah, I mean it's almost like 30 seconds a mile. So that, you know, that's like that. That's I mean it's crazy to think that like that's, you know, that's what it was able to do. And we're talking in a week, like 10 days. Wow. You know, from like when I started this stuff to our regional meet, and you know, and so like the profound effects of when you get the neurologic system restored, you get those connections like back, you know, and you know this as well as I do, but maybe some of the people don't. But it's like, you know, even when we're working with some of the best athletes in the world, right? They're having some of these like amazing performances in spite of, you know, you check them out and they may have like a third or half of all their muscles shut down, and they're still able to, you know, be in the NFL, make Olympic teams, medal at the Olympics, and they're functioning at like 50% of their capacity. And when you expose a lot of these people to this, they're like, they get it right away. They're like, boom, that light bulb goes on, and they're like, oh man, it's like, I got to have you in my corner. I got to like be getting this kind of work done, because they really know. And I think too, is like, you know, why it may look a little like kind of different on the outside, as soon as somebody experiences it, it's funny because they jokingly in Austin call me the witch doctor in the athletic community. It's kind of this like affectionate term that has come like kind of developed over the years, because we're able to fix things that, you know, a lot very quickly that a lot of people aren't. And so it's like, I always joke with people, you know, when people describe what we do to the outside, I'm like, man, I kind of wonder how I have patience. But like, as soon as people experience the work, they're like, oh, this makes complete sense. And so I think some people have a tough time like communicating what's, like what's actually happened. But as they become patients for a long time, they start to understand a little more of the anatomy and physiology that's based behind it and how it is. It's not real. It's all science based too. That's the best part about what we're doing. It may be a little different approach, like how we evaluate the body, but it's all scientifically based. It's all based out of like neurology and physiology and anatomy, and everything's connected. I mean, all the different reflexes that we use have been validated with like different types of testing, like that would be considered like very normal in the Western world. So it's just awesome, powerful stuff.
Absolutely. And you touched on something really important. People, when they see the results that we're delivering with these kind of principles and concepts, they don't have an awareness of where to put it. And so, like you mentioned, they'll say, "Oh, witch doctor," or "guru," or they'll have tons of labels, and it's none of those things.
Yeah.
This is neurological rehabilitation. This is physiological testing that we're doing. This is muscle testing, and each of the things that we're doing could be traced back to the nervous system, to the textbooks that we've all learned from.
Yep.
And what we're applying are principles which will reset a system or a circuit in the body. And when you have the part of the body that's not functioning and you turn that circuitry back on, miraculous level type results can happen.
Yeah.
And it's truly amazing. And we could keep talking about this forever, and I know we can, but I know that at ICAK, one of the things that you've really expanded on, Noah, because you're athletic and you're have a lot of experience. But what I didn't even know, just through meeting you through doing quantum neurology with you, is your background in biochemistry. So you're a really smart fellow behind there, and you understand biochemistry on a level that I think I far above what I understand in biochemistry, and I really appreciate people who have a skill set that I don't have. And I appreciate how you explain these things, and you've come up with your own products that I think are revolutionary products. I think they're going to replace and, just knock out what's out there, because you're coming at it from the heart of a doctor and not from the heart of, industrial machine, coming out with products.
Yeah.
And the heart of the doctor comes out and says, I want to solve a problem. And the biggest problem, maybe I'm phrasing it incorrectly, is dehydration, or hydrating the system. And you as an athlete have it firsthand. Me as a patient, I have experience firsthand on dehydration. But why don't you tell us about your human nutrition project and the whole concept behind it and the exciting products that you have coming out?
Yeah, so we kind of started this. I was at 2016 Olympic trials, and I was with some of our athletes, and we're at basically the pinnacle event of like sport in track and field. And I was walking with we had just one of my athletes had just finished their shakeout, and we had done like little treatment, and we were walking out of the athlete area, and she's like, "Oh, I'm gonna just like grab like some water and Gatorade real quick, right?" And so she goes and she grabs in it like the all they had was Powerade, and she looks at it and like she's like, "Man, high fructose corn syrup." She's like, "I'm not drinking that junk." And so basically they had like water and like Powerade, which is like high fructose corn syrup, those kind of things provided. And then and I had been in Austin, I jokingly call it like the Austin epidemic with the athletes that we work with. From about like end of May to September, you see like all these like cramping, tension, like kind of things start to happen in the lower legs. And over the course of, over the course of the years, I developed, a protocol and testing procedure that we had that we could use to quickly eliminate leg cramps, tightness, Charlie horses, when you're laying in bed and you point your toes and your legs cramp, or you're dealing with like kind of the restless tingling feeling in your leg. We developed a whole protocol to test out for that, because we see a lot of performance detriments in the summer here. People will talk about how hard it is to train in Austin in the summer for marathons and endurance sports and things like that. And so, I was having to use like anywhere between like 3 and 6 products to fix this. And then, I had developed a formula that I had put together that would, I'd tell people, go buy this at, these things at the store, and then mix this like powder from our office here and do this. And so studying basically the physiology of like hydration and muscle cramping, tension, those kind of things, figuring out all the different things that played into that, we had a way that we could really get rid of it in about like 3 to 7 days, depending on how like severe it was. I mean, I've had patients that have cramps, had had cramps for 15 years every night when they go to bed, and we would start them on this formula. And then, but it was getting really hard for people to, to kind of go and make this. And there were, and so basically what I sat down with them, I said, hey, you know what? We can make this formula. And so we started blending and testing, and I had my test to validate it. And then we had some, what the World Health Organization sets out for like oral rehydration standards for like, if you were in a third world country and you didn't have access to an IV, they would use a formula similar to ours to hydrate you over the course of 24 hours. And in 24-hour hydration studies, they show that ORS solutions are about 95% comparable to IVs and hydration. And so we wanted to make them more natural, because typically they're not very natural. So we formulated based on the testing that we had done in our office, because we just didn't have, like products that would 100% accomplish what we were wanting to. We could mix and match a bunch of things, but there wasn't like, a really simple solution. So that's how we started with our Lyte-Switch product, was essentially studying the physiology of muscle contraction and cellular, like basically like the cellular membrane potential, figuring out like what affects those things, how they work, why these things are imbalanced, and what's going on. And then we use some of the ORS solution formulas, and then used applied kinesiology testing to make sure that it was actually effective in our body. And what we wanted to see is we have a little, and that's what we're going to be demonstrating at ICAK, is this quick, like, minute test that you can do to evaluate basically the hydration status of your body, electrolyte status of your body, and like tissue mineral level, so you can make a quick change. And we found that if we're able to fix these reflexes that we're going to teach at ICAK, that a lot of times it's going to kind of get rid of the muscle cramping, tension. It's going to help to relieve kind of the tingly, restless feeling that people have in their legs. And so it's an awesome, and it's awesome in that area. And so as we've expanded out in the Human Nutrition Project, we're looking at, basically a lot of like the physiology and function of the body, and trying to create some general products for people, and really in the hydration and performance category, because athletes don't really have a good option for fueling when they are performing. It's either like sugar or refined carbohydrates, those kind of things. So we're actually in the fall going to be releasing a fueling product for like endurance athletes and triathletes, marathoners, people, CrossFitters, people who are wanting to basically fuel their performance. It has a very low like glycemic impact, where you can, and it actually is going to, they've actually, some research has come out that shows that you can actually have some of this carbohydrate formula with, or kicking yourself out of ketosis. So if you're a keto like person doing keto, you can actually incorporate some carbohydrates and some other things without coming out of your ketosis state. And because it stabilizes the insulin and blood sugar level, it doesn't cause spike. It helps with like sustained energy. And then we're actually utilizing a couple other biochemical cycles that people are very unfamiliar with, that actually help to, that it's one of the ways that your body actually, when you don't have enough glucose or you're doing fasting, it's actually how your body keeps your glucose levels, because glucose is important for the brain. So we're basically going into a few of the other like deeper biochemical cycles to make sure that we're fueling on all different levels, so your body can sustain endurance like that as well too. So that's going to be coming in the fall. So we're super stoked about that. And then we actually have a coffee too that enhances that has some stamina. We call it stamina coffee, but it's a whole bean coffee that's infused with reishi and cordyceps mushroom. So caffeine does have a positive effect on athletic performance. And so we wanted a way that we can incorporate that without overstimulating the body. So we actually have a lower caffeine coffee bean that we infused with reishi and cordyceps mushrooms. And cordyceps, have been known to enhance stamina endurance for a long time. And reishi is kind of a tonic mushroom to the nervous system. So when that caffeine kind of lifts you up, it kind of balances it out so you don't get jittery and jumpy and shaky and all that kind of stuff. So just some cool things that we're working on right now. And I'm sure as I nerd out more, there'll be other areas that I find huge issues with that I want to try to correct and improve. So, but that's kind of what we're doing with that. We wanted to be able to fuel athletes more healthy, so they're not relying on like sugary stimulant, kind of the typical things that athletes fuel with that eventually just destroy their bodies.
Now, going back on that, you talked some high level stuff. Let me take it down to the basics for possibly the non-doctors in the room. Why is high fructose corn syrup a bad replacement concept, or sugary drinks that are out there that are the typical sports drinks? Why are those bad? They might serve a short-term gain, but why is that a bad idea for somebody, and where should they go from there?
Yeah. So, and this is, I actually, and it's kind of like weird to me as I've looked at some of even the new formulas that are coming out, like as far as in the fueling product lines, everybody's using fructose, even if it's not high fructose corn syrup, they're using fructose. And I try to have this explanation. It's usually a fructose and maltodextrin, or they just use simple sugar. And so fructose is rough on the body because it's not directly absorbable. And the reason that people put it in is they call it a lower glycemic sugar because your body has to actually convert it to glucose first. But what has to happen is you have to process that through the liver. And so fructose is one of the biggest reasons why people are starting to develop non-alcoholic fatty liver. And so because they have to process this, and it essentially, when that happens, if you have a ton of it or you're using it quite regularly, it'll actually increase the fat content in your liver. And so it's very hard on the liver, very hard to process. And so that's really one of the big problems we see with that. Now, on the simple sugar side, I think most people are fairly familiar with kind of the you drink it, it goes straight in, your blood sugar spikes way up, and then your body secretes insulin, which is a hormone that pulls sugar out of the blood, and then it crashes back down. You get, a little bit like shaky, lightheaded, headaches. The word hangry usually resonates with most people, where you get a little grumpy and irritable, and then you're like, oh, I need to eat something else. And then you spike back up and down. And that actually can have a huge effect on all kinds of things in the body, especially, going hypoglycemic when you're trying to perform is the reason that people bonk, right? Like that. So when you don't have something that stabilizes the blood sugar over a long period of time, your chances of bonking or crashing in an endurance race is much higher. And then maltodextrin, typically derived from corn, actually has a really tough effect on the gut bacteria. It can smother out gut bacteria. It kind of propagates the feeding of bad bacteria. And typically it's made from corn, which about 70% of the corn in the US is GMO. So there's going to be extra pesticides, glyphosates, those kind of things in there that can create issues. So that's why we're not huge fans of some of those. And that's why it becomes such an issue, is because it's really detracting from your health to try to, if you're trying to fuel with those things, it can actually be a little problematic for your health.
Yeah, excellent. And a few questions I also have when it comes to hydration is the volume of hydration necessary to truly be hydrated.
Yep.
Also detoxification, because we need to be properly hydrated in order to detox.
Yep.
And so could you touch on those two ideas?
Yeah. So what one of the things that we kind of do as just a general overarching thing with hydration is we say, divide your weight by 2. And that should be the minimum amount of ounces you should have, right? And so that's kind of our baseline for hydration. Now, if you're performing as an athlete in the heat, those kind of things, you need more. If you're undergoing some type of a detoxification program or sauna therapy or any of those kind of things, you're going to need excess hydration. And then one of the other things that we typically see quite regularly, and this is part of the test that we're going to be showing at ICAK, is that oftentimes people, they don't have the minerals or the raw materials to actually hold on to their water. And so things like chloride and sodium become really important for holding on. So if you're like one of those people that drink water all the time and you're just constantly going to the bathroom, oftentimes that means that you don't have the right electrolyte or mineral balance to hold your water. And that can be affected by certain stress hormones, those kind of things as well. And so typically, yeah, we'll say, about half your body weight in ounces. And, you can use our Lyte-Switch product, which is a great hydrator. We recommend a lot of times people just do, 1 scoop in the morning with their, you should be getting up and having a big, probably 16 to 30 ounce glass of water first thing in the morning. And so we're typically doing like 1 scoop of the Lyte-Switch product, and that is like a morning hydration routine is a fantastic way to, make sure that you're getting those minerals. And then over the course of the day, you'll hold on to your water better as you're drinking more and more and more. And so, yeah, then you may need, like I said, you may need to increase water intake a little bit, but oftentimes it's really important to have the mineral base, because a lot of people that are under a lot of stress, they have, that affects their hormone called aldosterone. And as aldosterone starts to lower, your body will actually start to basically pee out more of your salts that allow you to hold on to water. So people that are under large amounts of stress actually need a little bit more salt because they're in a maladapted state. So this can actually be really beneficial if you stand up and you get lightheaded or dizzy, if you have low blood pressure and you feel like you can't get your blood pressure up. Oftentimes those people are having trouble with salts as well. So those are some kind of common things to look for that may mean that you don't have the minerals to hold on to your hydration. So
very, very important information. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I've been saved by your product, and I suffered with some of those symptoms, and I recognized that it was a hydration issue, and I started taking, I had headaches and all sorts of problems, and I took the Lyte-Switch product, and literally within 30 minutes, I was like back to normal, kind of woke up out of my haze of that fog of disorientation caused by the dehydration. And very powerful. Your product tastes great as well, which is very exciting, because we all know there's products out there that may be good for you, but they don't taste that well. And so very excited about all the projects you have coming forth. Now, I'm going to be presenting at ICAK as well. I'm going to be presenting on sensory rehabilitation. And you're a certified quantum neurology practitioner. And what experience do you have with the sensory rehabilitation? What could you share with people about what we're going to be doing at ICAK coming up?
Yeah, so the sensory thing, I think, is like one of the magic components of quantum neurology that makes it like so unique. I'd studied all kinds of everything, and I'd never seen anything like the sensory. When you brought it up in the first module and we started going through it, I was like, man, this is so cool. And so for all the patients and practitioners, I'm going to share a story, because I think that's going to sum up sensory rehabilitation in the best. And I remember on one of the message board for the doctors, when we kind of asked questions, we were struggling with patients and stuff. Somebody had posted something about struggling with a patient and thinking it was in their head. And so I had this one patient that came in that was dealing with a shoulder issue. And, I had been treating her, and I was and I feel like shoulders are something I'm really good at. We treat a lot of swimmers and all that. So it's it's something I feel super confident with. And I was like, man, I am not getting anywhere with this patient. And then I was and then I started to drift and, go what am I missing? What's going on? Is this kind of is it in her head? Is it more just something like that? And I started to drift there. And it was about that time that I remember seeing that post. And I was like, okay, clearly everything I'm trying isn't working. I'm let me just do the next few visits, go through all the sensory stuff of the shoulder. And so we start, doing it, couple different sensory things, each treatment. And she's slowly getting better. And I was like, okay, this is working. It's really improving. And, so after, I think it was the 4th visit with her, kind of finished up all the sensory stuff. And when I, legitimately the minute I finished up the last sensory protocol, she just started bawling. And I was like, okay. And she's like, so, you're talking about all this sensory stuff. And she was actually like physically abused. And whoever like used to grab her by the shoulders, and she had this stored memory of trauma in her shoulders. And as we went through and released the sensor, basically showed her that like this, because a lot of times what you always talk about is the body's not letting you go into emotion or do emotion because it's viewed as neurologically unsafe for the body. And this was like a whole different thing. And so as we went through and we unwound all these sensory components, the pain just went away. And I mean, she, still to this day is like doing great with no shoulder issue at all. And so I think that for me was like this kind of like aha moment with the sensory protocol. I mean, I just, I was struggling, and it was all sensory related because she had a trauma to that area that her body was now always, anytime it was touched or like moved or, you had to do something, it would activate this stored trauma because the sensory system was, essentially trying to protect her and keep the body, like held down. And so, it was just and so we always use it as a thing where it's like, your body's not failing on you. Usually it's trying to protect you from something. And oftentimes we just need to, our body holds on to some of these stored memories. We just need to show the body that it's safe. And so, lightly doing all the sensory rehabilitation, reminds the body, okay, this is actually safe to have sensory in this area. And I mean, I've heard all kinds of stories from the docs, like different types of car wrecks and, like explosions next to them, like all kinds of crazy things that the sensory protocol happens. So I think for every doctor that, like is doing, chiropractic or neurologically based work, it's like, you have to have this tool in your tool belt or you're going to miss some of these more complicated cases. And I know with, some of the, when people are losing motor function, it becomes super important to restore that sometimes first before anything to work on strengthening that up. So, I mean, it's just amazing, like what you can do with it. It's like the possibilities are really endless.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's a special part of quantum neurology is the sensory rehabilitation. And sensory is 80% of the nervous system. And most doctors are working in the 20% of the muscle skeletal side of the nervous system and getting tremendous results. But when they hit a wall, oftentimes there's this sensory feedback loop that's not getting handled. And you gave such a great example of that and explained it so appropriately. And the best way I could explain that feeling that the body doesn't feel safe is if you've ever been poked in the eye, you will sit there and you'll cover your eye and you don't feel safe to even open it. And that takes time for you to kind of get comfortable and allow yourself to open your eye and then to see and to regain the vision in that eye. And so similarly happens on your body, except there's different layers of sensation that we are able to rehabilitate and restore. We could do this to the pain layer, the vibration layer, the hot and cold layer, light touch, deep touch, pressure, proprioception, and form recognition. And all those layers together form what we would call our reality experience, what we consider to be a real experience in our body. And if most of us have been to a dentist and they numb out our jaw or our mouth to some degree, and we can instantly feel the difference of the reality experience from one part of our face to another. Similarly, when we get injured, we could have a loss of that reality experience. And that's why people have all these different reactions. And I've seen people that have had a stroke, for example, and they'll walk in and they'll just be brushing their arm. And that's their body's request for light touch. And we'll have some people, with the same situation, just kind of bang their arm or bang their hip, and if you're a doctor, I'm sure you've seen this kind of presentation where people will just walk in banging on their hip. And that's their body requesting the sensation rehabilitation of deep touch. And the conversation continues on all the different sensations and how they present when those have been inhibited. A very common presentation is when pressure sense is lost. That's where arthritis will develop. And so, for example, one of my favorite stories is a gentleman I used to treat. He came in with a bilateral knee x-ray, so both knees on the x-ray, and one knee was destroyed by arthritis, and one knee looked like a 20-year-old, and he was in his late 70s. And I'm like, have you been running one-legged marathons, or what's going on? Why is this one leg all damaged and the other one's not? And he's like, oh, well, I'm 70 years old. It's like, well, so's the other knee.
Yeah.
That one looks like a 20-year-old knee. What's going on? And it didn't happen in that session, but what I realized through research was that he lost pressure sense. And so when the pressure sense on that joint disappeared, now there has to be bone-on-bone action in order for the muscles to reflex, to do normal function. And that's where I started understanding these principles and applying the holographic testing, the GPOI principle, to create neurological recognition of each of these layers of sensation. And at the ICAK, I'm presenting the pain layer, so how to restore the pain layer of communication. And also I'll be demonstrating pressure sense, which I'm just talking about now. And I'm also going to be demonstrating the sensory processing, which most people will call that the dyslexia protocol, but it's bigger than that. And I know you've had experiences with those techniques. Is there a comment you have on any one of the pain or the pressure or the sensory processing?
Yeah, I mean, I think all of them are super important. I think oftentimes when you have an injury and you do the structural work, you have to integrate in the sensory rehab. So it's like, I think the magic for me is anytime I see something that is not really resolving like we want it to, or like we would expect, I'm like, okay, there's a maladapted kind of sensory thing. And so, yeah, you find quite regularly that essentially, yeah, the body has hypersensitized pain receptors often after an injury. And it's always going to keep those. Those are typically the ones that stay sensitized the longest, because your body does not want you to get hurt again. So it's going to keep those pain receptors like up and active. So, you may work on, I use a sprained ankle a lot in this thing is oftentimes we're able to get everything reset, the swelling's down, all of that, but they're still, like they still touch it and it's still sore. They can do a majority of what they need to do, but it just, it's always like achy and sore a little bit until everything fully resolves. But after you do all those corrections, you go through and you do the pain, the pain, figure out where the pain pattern is. Those pain receptors are hypersensitized, clear those out, and then it's like boom. And then also your body, when it has a little bit of hyperactive pain sensors, it's always going to have a little bit of extra inflammation in the body with it too, because that's how it sensitizes the pain receptors, is through the inflammatory cascade. Those pain receptors signal inflammation to come. So if you're having like unresolved inflammation and those things as well too, you have to fix that. And then pressure allows essentially the joints to restore themselves too. So you oftentimes have to work to get that joint to function. We always talk about, like feeling better and functioning better in our practice as well. And it's like, we're really good at getting people to feel better really quickly. And most of the time, most patients, that's what that's like their main objective. But then when you start working with athletes, you want to make sure that the function of the body is just, as good as feeling good. And so that's where the magic of I think the applied kinesiology and AK, quantum neurology, the sensory stuff comes in, is because it's really making sure that everything is functioning at this like super optimal level. And so that's kind of what, especially with the pressure, that almost that spring of the joint to be able to create that, like you're talking about with the knee, with the resistance, it's almost allowing if you're an athlete or something and you've done plyometric exercises, you're training the body to be kind of like this little pop or explosion upon resistance. And you can actually, with the pressure receptors, you can get each joint to really maximize that like plyometric proprioceptive response when it hits. So you can get more and more performance out of each and every joint. And so legitimately, I kind of like nerd out on this. And when we have an elite athlete that's coming in that wants the whole gamut of stuff. I mean, we analyze down, we have the ability to test about 700 different muscle divisions in the body. We test all the major muscle nerve connections, all the sensory, all the cranial nerves, I mean, and the organ reflexes, like lymphatic reflex. I mean, there's like, it's kind of overwhelming, but when you start to like layer it out to an athlete to be like, hey, here's all we can do. But the sensory component really, allows them to create this like magic in their nervous system that helps the communication of everything else. Because if sensory is not working, sensory is your defense system. If it's not working properly, it's guarding. So it's actually holding you back a little bit from doing things.
Absolutely. And, I want to just, before we finish up, talk about, we're talking about elite performers, and elite performers have that, they're already good. They're, if not great already, yet there's always room for their improvement considering the nerve actions and reflexes that we're checking. But all these same principles apply to the regular population. And, I think that's important to mention because this work excels with elite performers because it's so powerful. Yet at the same time, it's just as powerful, if not more powerful, for the non-elite performers and the moms and the dads out there and the grandmas and everyone else. Wouldn't you agree with that?
So, yeah, I always say so. It's like I would say we have a really unique patient population in our office. We have a lot of like athletes and high level performers, and then we have a lot of incredibly sick people. Like we're talking like neurological degeneration, MS, autoimmune, all these crazy conditions where the body is essentially just falling apart. And oftentimes when I do, the neuromuscular workup of, let's say, somebody that's trying to make an Olympic team and somebody who has multiple sclerosis, sometimes it's actually really close to each other. Like sometimes, we always say athletes are masters of adaptation. But
absolutely,
when they lose their ability to adapt is when they can no longer start to perform. And typically you're like, like somebody who has like maybe a chronic illness or something like that, they've also lost their ability to adapt. And so there's this just breakdown in the neural communication system of both of them. And when you kind of remove, the preconceived notions of labeling and you just look at them from a pure like physiologic analysis of the body, the presentation can be very similar. And so the protocols are very similar. So, maybe somebody's watching this and they're like, well, I don't work with, I don't have this athlete communication. I have like a geriatric population or a pediatric population, or, we just kind of see the everyday folks just trying to get through life and all of that. It's all the same. The principles, like the principles, the anatomy and the physiology of the body functions fairly similarly in every single person. So it doesn't matter, if, you don't see a bunch of elite athletes or, you're only working with like geriatrics. It's like when you apply, and that's all this work is. And I think it could almost be like applied physiology, right? Or applied anatomy, applied neurology. It's just, and I think the way that we apply it, it's just, nobody's seen it, and so it looks different, but it's all science. Like it's all right. Based on like science. It's there's no mysticism or anything like that. It seems that way because of how quickly we get things done, but the science, I mean, it is exactly the same science that they're using in the medical world. It's all the same thing. It's just a different way of evaluating the body. So it's so profound. Like when it's so simple that I think that's what makes everybody a little bit like, well, that was interesting. That was really simple. And we got this result. And we're like, yeah, you don't need these expensive tests. You don't need these expensive procedures. And, you don't need to be spending hundreds of thousands of, dollars for experimental procedures to try to rehabilitate the body when, if you haven't, and most people haven't even started here. And it's really the basis of where we should start before we, expand up to other, kind of higher level, like I don't want to say higher level procedures, but more expensive, invasive procedures, so I don't know. For me, it's the applied anatomy, physiology, neurology, it's just sound science. And it makes so much sense that it's not there's no mysticism to it or anything like that. It's just solid science.
Absolutely. And that's why we attract the full gamut of health practitioners, medical doctors, acupuncturists, chiropractors, naturopaths. They all want to learn applied kinesiology and quantum neurology and the related arts, because the focus ultimately, the reason I became a doctor, and I'm pretty confident every other doctor that's listening, because we all want to help people and we want to help people get to their best. And when you start learning ways to do that very quickly, it's like, wow, I'm going to focus on delivering that level of result, raise the bar for my entire profession, to be speaking on neurology and muscle testing and the specifics of the body's natural actions and reactions to achieve desired results, as opposed to, let me see what this test says, and then figure it out from there. And those tests have their place, but there's nothing like being able to help the person that's right in front of you by using neurological and muscle tests directly on their body, and then providing rehabilitation in that moment to help them get an instant change neurologically and muscularly speaking. No, I know we could talk all day, and we probably will, but I want to point people to the ICAK conference that's coming up. It's July 25th, 26th, 27th, and 28th in San Diego. I am so honored and excited to be there, and I'm excited to see as always. I'm proud that you made your launch with Lyte-Switch with the quantum neurology events and with our community, and I see you growing out there, and I'm so excited about your products, the new flavors, and the I Am Stamina coffee. From a daily coffee drinker, I'm excited to get on board with the Stamina coffee and get that going. And I look forward to seeing you on July 25th, 26th, 27th, and 28th.
Looking forward to it.
All right. Thank you so much, and we'll be connecting soon. And I'm sure we'll have another podcast sometime soon.
Awesome.
Oh, before I go, how do people get a hold of you?
Yeah, so you can find the humannutritionproject.com is our website for our products and all of that. And then healthplusaustin.com is if you're in the Austin area or have somebody in the Austin area that is looking for, some of the work that we're doing and all of that, they can find us there.
Excellent. High recommend. Please check out Dr. Noah. He's got some amazing products. Please support him. Support the community that is supporting natural healing in the body. And we look forward to talking to you soon. And hang tight there, Noah, and we'll be talking again.
All right.